I'd like to call on the Secretariat for us to begin this morning with some housekeeping announcements. It relates to our agenda today, so please pay attention.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. For the last day of the Standing Committee meeting, we will proceed this morning. As you see on the screen, we will go through agenda items 44.1, 44.2, 82, 83, 36, 50, 51, 56, 57, 58, 59, 29, 10, 52, and 18 in this order. We are hoping that we'll get through all of this morning, as we will have to deal in the afternoon with 18 in-session documents. We have 18 COM documents this afternoon. So as soon as these items are over, or at 2 p.m., we will start with the COM documents, starting from COM 1. Which also means that there are some agenda items that have not been taken up during this meeting, which are agenda items 14, 21, 22, 72, 74, 78, 20, and 30, which will most likely be dealt with through notification to the parties seeking comments and inputs, and to be tabled at the meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So it will take a similar notification procedure as we have done for SC 77. I'll repeat the ones that will not be taken up at this meeting. Sorry, I'll do it in the correct numerical order. It'll be 14, 20, 21, 22, 30, 72, 74, and 78. Thank you, Chair.
Good morning. We have a lot to get through today. I said I would start this morning with item 44, Jaguars, and we will consider these items together. 44.1 is the report of the working group, and I invite Brazil to introduce this document.
Agradezco a la presidenta por darme la palabra.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. In keeping with the COP19 mandate, I'd like to present the report of the Intersessional Working Group on Jaguars. And I'm presenting the recommendations by the range states as well as transit and destination countries of this species. In looking at these recommendations, we considered the first meeting of range states, which took place in Brazil in September 23. We should stress that the working group prepared recommendations and also concluded that for the major objective of ensuring that these recommendations were implemented, and they wanted to coordinate their efforts in order to ensure this species, which is a symbol of our region. And it was therefore a good idea to include these recommendations in a resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Then next item is 44.2, the report of the Secretariat, and I invite the Secretariat to introduce the document briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document presents the progress made by the Secretariat since SC 77 in the implementation of COP19 decisions on jaguars. The document includes the first draft of the situational analysis in Annex 2, as well as the first draft of program work for a range-wide jaguar initiative produced by the Secretariat of CMS. The Standing Committee is invited to provide guidance to the Secretariat on the next steps, including the development of an intergovernmental platform for its reporting to COP20. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I understand that the range states present at this meeting have met and considered the recommendations from the two documents. I also understand that their suggestions for recommendations have been published in INF document number 48. I would like to invite Brazil to introduce the results of the consultation among the range states here. And Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, Brazil is quite excited with the result of this consultation process, as Brazil attaches great importance to the conservation of the jaguar. It's endeavoring additional efforts to enhance internal coordination to participate coherently in different initiatives that aim the conservation of the jaguar. So with this spirit, Brazil has helped facilitate informal meetings that gather Jaguar Range States, CITES Secretariat, and also CMS Secretariat to discuss ways to enhance cooperation and streamline the work on the jaguar international level with the aim of the conservation of the species. Brazil and all the range states CMS Secretariat have gathered and produced the document, the info document, that 48 with proposals of change. Those changes would encompass both documents, 44.1 and 44.2, and this is a result of compromise. A compromise among all range states that are really concerned about the future and conservation of the species. We have, in addition to those, to that info doc, we only want to make small changes in this info doc, and I would like to make this in plenary. So in item C, number 4, instead of face-to-face, we will change in person. This is just to be more clarity in in-person meetings. The same applies in little e, so it will change face-to-face to in-person. And we also have an addition in item little a, which will read as the following. Request the Secretariat to incorporate the outcomes of the virtual and in-person meetings and in addendum to its report for consideration at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parts. This is just to make things a little bit more clear and in coherently with the procedures. So this is the result we have, and I hope that this can be approved. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I invite the Standing Committee members to discuss these new recommendations presented by Brazil on behalf of the range states present here. So I turn to Standing Committee members. Observer parties, I have Mexico.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank Brazil as chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Jaguar and the Secretariat for the documents that we have before us to establish the priorities for CITES and range states on jaguars. And we would like to say that this is the result of very hard work by the range states yesterday, and it is these are suggestions that are very helpful for our cooperation and for activities in order to protect jaguars. This in keeping with CITES and on recommendation of the Standing Committee. I'm pleased, Madam Chair, to inform you that we would be happy to host the second meeting of the Jaguar Range States if the results, if the necessary resources are obtained through CITES, CMS, and other partners. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I turn to Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Republic of Uzbekistan, as host and president of the 14th meeting of the CMS Conference of Parties and range state of the CMS Central Asian Mammals Initiative, and as a host of CITES COP20, Uzbekistan would like to support cooperation between CITES and CMS. Since its establishment 10 years ago, the Central Asian Mammals Initiative has provided a useful intergovernmental platform for conservation across the range states. It is supported by a detailed program of work which provides concrete conservation measures for 16 species occurring in 14 range states, while most of the range states of the initiatives are parties to CMS. Some are yet to join to the convention. Among those are China and Russian Federation, whom would like to cordially invite to join to the convention. While the initiative is run by its range states, it provides an important framework for a variety of partners to support the range states with the implementation of the program of work. As such, we consider it is a useful tool to be replicated for other species and other geographies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on Poland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states appreciate the work of Jaguar range states on this matter, and we support the result. We welcome that it foresees close cooperation between CITES and CMS, which helps to use resources in the most efficient manner and improve results for conservation, which is also in line with the CMS CITES Joint Work Programme 2021-2025. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Observer parties, observer organizations. I have CMS, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Like many wild species of animals, jaguars are subject to threats that range from habitat destruction and fragmentation, illegal taking, as well as trade. Thus, cooperation of our two treaties is absolutely key. We were thus glad that both our COPs and standing committees have adopted mandates calling for close cooperation on this species, first and foremost by the range states and also by our two secretariats. We thus welcome the new proposal contained in Information Document 48, which is further strengthening cooperation between CMS and CITES as envisaged by CMS COP14. Thank you.
I call on Honduras.
Honduras apoya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honduras supports Mexico's proposal as it is a range state and to the far north of the Jaguars Range. Thank you.
I call on Argentina.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Argentina would like to thank our regional representative, the CITES Secretariat and the CMS Secretariat, and all of the range states for all of the work done. Thank you.
I have two more observer organizations. I would ask you to limit yourself to 1 minute. I really want to wrap this up. We've heard from several of the range states. We've heard from standing committee members. UNEP followed then by WCS, but 1 minute, please.
Buenos días, presidente.
Good morning. UNEP would like to congratulate range states for the commitment that they have made. We have just one suggestion with regress to paragraph B of the new text. Perhaps CBD could be moved because it's not exactly this on the same level as the CITES and CMS. So I think it would be good to show the cooperation among the three conventions, and I would like to say that we work with all three secretariats and with the range states as well as Jeff that works on jaguars in Panama, and we also work with UNDP, and we have programs in Colombia, Paraguay, and Ecuador. I do think that this initiative being taken by the range states will really benefit from financial resources that will enable them to implement what they have in mind. Thank you, Madam.
WCS, and this is the last intervention.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of 14 organizations, which I'll send. We welcome the range states document and collaboration of the secretariats and support for a unified Jaguar initiative. We urge to streamline this effort that the Standing Committee requests that parties consider this joint initiative as the intergovernmental platform on Jaguars to facilitate transboundary cooperation and maximize impact. We highlight that the Jaguar 2030 roadmap can inform this joint initiative. We urge parties to also collaborate between now and June on a resolution for adoption at COP20 that establishes a joint CITES CMS Jaguar initiative as the mechanism by which parties to both conventions can implement the program of work according to their respective mandates. We stand ready to continue to work with range states to maintain their momentum and facilitate this effort for the sake of the Jaguar. Thank you.
Thank you, and with that I conclude debate, and I'll consult with the Secretariat how I best sum this up to the Standing Committee members. So I would conclude, I look for the Standing Committee's concurrence that the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in the document 48, noting that the report referred to in E will need to be an addendum, and the committee takes note of the discussion and interventions made on the floor. Looking for thumbs up, nodding heads, smiles, something. Okay, I've got nodding heads, I've got agreement. And I wish to express our appreciation to Mexico for their offer to host this important meeting. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 82, nomenclature of Appendix 3 listings decision 18.314, Rev Cop 19. And I call upon the nomenclature specialist to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. Document SC 78, Doc 82 summarizes the deliberations in the Plants and Animals Committees regarding the process to update nomenclature and adopt updated nomenclature standard references for species or higher taxa listed in Appendix 3. The committees concluded that because inclusion and withdrawal of listings in Appendix 3 is a matter of individual parties, therefore changing the nomenclature underpinning these listings is also a matter for the listing party. Such updates should preferably occur in consultation with the Secretariat and nomenclature specialists so as to achieve greatest possible coordination and agreement with nomenclature adopted for species and higher taxa listed in Appendices 1 and 2. The document before us, in its annexes, presents amendments to Resolution 9.25, Rev Cop 18, on implementation of the Convention for Species in Appendix 3, and to Resolution 12.11, Rev Cop 19, on standard nomenclature, and these are proposed by the Plants and Animals Committees. These amendments would clarify and describe a clear process how nomenclature changes are implemented for Appendix 3 species. The Standing Committee is invited to review this document and the proposed amendments to the two resolutions, and if agreed with, submit these amendments for consideration at COP20. And with that, the Standing Committee is invited to agree that decisions 18.313, Rev Cop 19, and 18.314, Rev Cop 19, have been implemented and can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I ask the Standing Committee to discuss the recommendations in paragraph 14. I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the nomenclature specialists of both of the scientific committees. We've got some minor amendments to propose in the annex of the document. So in paragraph 1A, little Roman 2, by inserting the word scientific ahead of each mention of the word name, so it would be scientific name in each case, to be clearer and consistent with the wording in paragraph 1E, little Roman 1. In paragraph 1C, we suggest inserting the words after Appendix 3, and when a non-standard reference has been used. Provide the nomenclature specialist ... In paragraph 6B, by inserting the words export certificates or before the words certificates of origin. And then in paragraph 6B, by inserting the words proposed before taxonomic and nomenclature in the first line. Thank you.
New Zealand, can you please repeat the last two edits so that we can capture them?
Thank you. In paragraph 6B, insert the words export certificates or ahead of the wording certificates of origin. So it would be export certificates or certificates of origin. And in paragraph 6B, again, inserting the word proposed before the text saying taxonomic and nomenclatural, so it would be the proposed taxonomic and nomenclatural, etc. in the first line. Currently, the proposed wording almost assumes that CITES acceptance of the proposed taxonomic or nomenclature changes, so that's why we suggest proposed rather than assume it's going to happen.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, originally we were going to say we supported the recommendations as written, but given the new information, I believe that we could support all of the amendments suggested, although for the second to last one on 6B regarding export certificates, we think it would be export permits. Okay, in that case, we would be supportive of these edits or the recommendations as amended by New Zealand, Oceania. Thank you.
I open the floor to observer parties. I open the floor to observer organizations. And then I would conclude, look to the Standing Committee, that the Standing Committee accepts the recommendations in paragraph 14, and then Standing Committee paragraph 14A, and then the Standing Committee agrees to the proposed amendments in Annex 1 as amended by the New Zealand and the USA, and then Standing Committee agrees to the decision in paragraph C and agrees that decisions 18.313 and 18.34 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. So that's my conclusion. I see nodding heads, and we will move on to the next agenda item. Next agenda item is item 83, higher tax on listings in the appendices, decision 19.273, SC 78 Doc 83 Rev 1, and I turn to the nomenclature specialist to introduce it.
Thank you again, Chair. Document SC 78 Doc 81 Rev 1 summarizes the deliberations in the Plants and Animals Committees on how taxa should be listed in Appendix 1 or 2, following adopted changes to nomenclature, specifically whether the listing of a higher taxon is equivalent and thus interchangeable with individual listings of all the species contained in that higher taxon. The committees concluded that such listings cannot automatically be assumed to be equivalent, and therefore such changes in listing in the appendices can only be made as part of regular nomenclatural updates if it is determined that such changes do not alter the scope of protection, i.e., it is clearly consistent with your original listing proposal. The document before us presents the Plants and Animals Committee's recommended amendments to paragraph 2F of Resolution 12.11, Ref COP 19, on standard nomenclature, which would integrate these conclusions. The Standing Committee is therefore invited to review these documents and the proposed amendments to the resolution, and if agreed with, submit these amendments for consideration at COP20 and agree that decisions 19.272 and 19.273 have been implemented and can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
I ask the Standing Committee members to discuss the recommendations in paragraph 12. I have Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we thank the nomenclature specialist parties and the Secretariat for their work on this issue. The amendments proposed to the resolution 12.11 will add clarity when higher taxon listing can be recommended by the specialist and adopted as nomenclature updates, saving time and resources otherwise needed for proposals to amend the appendices. We therefore support the amendments to the resolution COP 12.11 in paragraph 11 of this document and the recommendations in paragraph 12. I thank you.
Thank you. I open to observer parties. I have Peru.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Peru supports the recommendations 12A and B, and we would like to thank the nomenclature specialist. We would like to add one thing. We have often had the opportunity to say that we have had concerns about the inclusion of higher taxa because that does pose problems with respect to the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you. I open to observer organization. And with that, not seeing any requests, I conclude discussion, and I'll conclude in a minute. So I suggest the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations contained in paragraph 12A and B. So I look for nodding heads. I see them, and we can move on. Moving on to agenda item 36, possession of specimens of species included in Appendix 1, decision 19.67, and I call on the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes progress in discussions on the regulation and penalization of possession of illegally traded specimens of species included in the appendices. The Secretariat published a notification on the subject matter and gathered views for 1 member of the Standing Committee, 6 parties and 4 observers. Pursuant to Article 8 of the Convention, the Standing Committee is invited to review and submit to the COP the amendments to Resolution Conf 8.4 Rev COP 15 to expressly refer to the regulation and penalization of possession of illegally traded specimens, to remind parties of the necessity to regulate this matter under national legislation, and to agree that Decision 19.67 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. It should be noted that beyond technical updates, the proposed amendments to Resolution 8.4 are based on wording coming from the Convention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I open for discussion of the Standing Committee members' recommendations in paragraph 16. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We support the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 8.4 contained in the annex to more closely align the 4 minimum requirements of the National Legislation Project with the Convention text. However, we would like to reiterate our view that while there is good reason for parties to have provisions in place to penalise both illegal trade and possession of CITES specimens, the Convention text is more flexible, which should be appropriately considered by the Secretariat when supporting parties to improve their legislation or assessing legislation under the National Legislation Project. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We oppose recommendations A and B of the document. As a criminalization of possession is not mandatory in the Convention, it cannot be used to categorize the legislation. With regard to argumentation concerning Article 8, in the case that there is not the option to choose only the simultaneous penalization of trade and possession, there would not be the need to add the term or both in Article 8, paragraph 1 of the Convention. We do not deny that the question of the regulation of possession is covered under the provisions of the Convention, as the Secretariat argues regarding Article 14 of the Convention, but this does not prove that there must be both options. The parties have the discretion to choose one of the two options or both. As for recommendation C, we agree with the amendments to the resolution 8.4 in the preambular part. However, we oppose adding the new para 3. Lastly, Madam Chair, we agree to recommendation D. Thank you.
I call on the DRC.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on behalf of the Central African sub-region, we would like to thank and congratulate the Secretariat for the documents that have been submitted, and we welcome the efforts that have been made and contributed to this. The sub-region proposes that we improve this by adding specific guidance for the management of the possession of specimens listed in Appendix 1, in particular for those that may have been acquired under the pre-convention status. This also applies to specimens of CITES listed species that could be transferred to Appendix 2. And we would like that the recommendations would avoid state parties making these issues that are of concern. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We agree that the issue of possession of specimens of species included in the CITES appendices, particularly Appendix 1, is a critical aspect of implementation of the Convention. Effective implementation of paragraph 1 of Article 8 of the Convention is necessary to ensure achievement of CITES goals. We believe that strong national legislation in this regard is necessary, and we also agree with the conclusions of the Secretariat provided in document SC 78-36. We also appreciate the updated model law as it can greatly support parties in revising their legislation, especially the parties with limited resources. We also agree with the recommendations provided in the document, included amendments of the resolution Conf 8.4 on national laws for implementation of the Convention. Finally, from the perspective of the country where the legislation covers this issue, we would like to highlight that effective implementation is also linked to the capacity of enforcement authorities, and we would like to draw attention to the need of more capacity building activities for enforcement authorities, particularly wildlife crime investigation method. Thank you, Chair.
I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States, speaking on behalf of the North American region, supports all of the recommendations in the document. We support reminding parties whose legislation is in Category 2 and 3 under the National Legislation Project that possession of specimens obtained in violation of the Convention is one of the areas being analyzed by the Secretariat in the context of the review of national legislation. We also support that parties whose legislation is in Category 1 under the National Legislation Project identify potential loopholes in their national CITES implementing legislation, in particular with regard to the possession of illegally traded specimens of CITES listed species, and to adopt any necessary amendments. We support submitting to COP20 an amendment to Resolution Conf 8.4, Rev COP 15 on national laws for implementation of the Convention and require more clearly that domestic measures prohibit possession of specimens obtained in violation of the Convention to facilitate enforcement of the prohibition on trade in violation of the Convention. Finally, we support the recommendation that Decision 19.67 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And would I ask the speakers when they speak to just express support for the recommendations and not repeat the recommendations just to save some time? Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We just want to align our position with the comment made by EU. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening the floor to observer parties. I have Israel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, we align ourselves with the comments by the regional representatives from Africa, with Georgia, and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China cannot agree with the opinion expressed in paragraph 12. In this regard, China concurs with Poland on this issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I open the floor to observer organizations. And I will then pause and consult with the Secretariat. So the chair's not hearing consensus among the standing committee members, but I know I haven't heard from several standing committee members. So I'm looking for a way forward. If any other standing committee members want to speak, I've got the intervention by Poland, which several members and some parties supported, and I have the same thing basically where they wanted to delete recommendation A and B and the suggested text to the amendment, the suggested amended text. Then I have the DRC and Georgia and the US and some parties supporting accepting the recommendations as is. So I'm looking to the members on the standing committee yet because I don't have any consensus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan support Poland. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan. And I will call on the Secretariat. They have an addition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Secretariat just wanted to bring to the attention of the Standing Committee that if Article 8 of the Convention is interpreted with the sentence trading or possession of or both as being an either-or situation, it means that under the national legislation project, the party could decide to regulate only possession and not trade and still make it to Category 1 of the NLP. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that important clarification. All right, if there's no consensus or it's evenly split, then essentially we send no recommendations forward to the COP on this one. And maybe we can agree that the decision has been implemented and can be deleted. I mean, to continue to work on this seems not to find common ground. So can we? So I guess I'm looking for, I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a fundamental issue of CITES, and so we suggest sending the entire thing to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties and let the parties decide if we can't resolve it here.
Thank you. I have Brazil, and then we'll see where we are.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are listening to this conversation and discussion. We think the proposition of the U.S. is a reasonable one, since I mean it's important for parties to continue discussing this, and since we don't find agreement here in the Standing Committee, I think it's fair enough to forward this matter to the COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have the UK.
We'd just like to echo the comments of Brazil. The US approach seems like a sensible way forwards. Thank you.
Yeah, the chair was leaning that way. I also have Senegal, but that would be the last intervention I'll take because I think we don't need further discussion.
Oui, le Sénégal.
Yes, Senegal also goes along the same lines as the United States and Brazil, because it's a very important document. If we cannot find a solution here, we should send the whole document to the COP. Thank you.
So I'm looking for the standing committees that we would agree to basically send this report and its recommendations to the COP for discussion and consideration there. I'm seeing nodding heads. Is that the way forward? I see most people agree that's the way forward, so we'll do that because it is important. Moving on to agenda item 50, purpose of transaction codes, decision 19.149, SC 78 document 50, and I call on the working group chair, Canada.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, this document presents the results of the discussions of the working group on the purpose of transaction codes. As there has not been a report presented to the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee, this is the report of work since the SC 76. For paragraph C of the mandate, a resolution that took place since the purpose of transaction codes in paragraph 12 of the document, and no change to the resolution is presented. We did not spend too long on paragraph B of the mandate, which looks at the overlap between purpose of transaction codes, but identified that codes Z, G, and Q would be considered. The group, above all, concentrated on the first paragraph, which looked at the definition of the purpose code P, and we put forward a definition for P, and for T is a code that is used by default if there is not a more appropriate code available for use. So we suggest that a definition for code T is not necessary for the moment, but that we need to have clear definitions for other
codes as a priority. So we invite the Standing Committee to consider our recommendations presented in the paragraph 14 of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the working group for its work. I open the floor to the Standing Committee to discuss the recommendations in paragraph 14, and I have Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Brazil agrees with the document in general and also agree that it's not time to discuss definition for code T. But we request a small change in the draft decision 20XX, item B, to include item Z in the current list. This is because we believe that the Z code normally used by zoos is frequently used as what we consider to be code T. Thus, we believe it's important to have further definition on code Z. We also believe that code B is of utmost importance for Brazil, and we confer very priority to this. We attach greater priority to this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other Standing Committee members? I open the floor to observer parties. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank the working group for this document. We could support the recommendation B regarding code T and recommendation D to re-establish the intersessional working group, but we do have some additions or questions on 20XX. In paragraph A, we see that there is a want for participants of the working group with expertise in the issuance of CITES documents. We do not feel that this should be an obligation, so we would like to propose when possible. So it would read, shall be composed of parties when possible with expertise in the issuance of CITES documents. On paragraph B, we see that the working group shall communicate through electronic media. Maybe we would feel that it would be beneficial to talk in person on all these situations and would like to keep it open. On recommendation A and C of paragraph 14, we do not agree with the proposed definition, and we feel that there is some more discussion needed to talk about the implications of this code. Specifically, when to see the normal treatment of the specimens under CITES, notably for Appendix 2 listed species, so also for pre-convention specimens, we need to go in a deeper analysis where code P should be used for the real non-commercial nature of the trade. We need to examine this together with resolution 13.7 under the control of the trade in personal and household effects, and therefore we feel that it's premature to already accept this purpose code, and so we therefore suggest that this should also be included in the task of the working group. On the proposal of Brazil on purpose code B to see that as a priority, we would be open to that and maybe include P as a priority as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. On B, we would like to support Brazil, and on 14A, the definition offered is a good basis for discussions. However, we would like to make it more clear and edit the second sentence. So it would read, purpose codes P should not be used for the initial movement of personal property sold, purchased, received as a gift, or otherwise transferred outside the individual state of usual residence. So we basically make the sentence complete grammatically. And we are adding another element received as a gift to promote a better application of this definition in the future so that it would make another element more clear. Thank you, Madam.
I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States agrees with the recommendations in the documents generally. We do have an edit to the definition of P for personal. We would like the sentence not for the initial movement of personal property sold, purchased, or otherwise transferred outside the individual state of usual residence removed from the definition. I think that is incorporated when we have the resolutions regarding the musical instruments and 1020 on pets. We tentatively support the recommendations in B about postponing the defining source code T. And we support Belgium's recommendation to prioritize the definition of source code B in the next intersession.
Thank you. I have Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the proposals made by the European Union. Thank you.
Gracias, señora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are in agreement with that which was said by the delegation of Brazil, that of Belgium, and what we had expressed by the United States on Code P. And if a working group is set up, we would like to participate. Thank you.
No, there will be no more working groups. It is the last day, at least here. I turn to New Zealand.
Thank you. We would just like to align ourselves with Brazil and the United States and those who've supported the text and the recommendation with amendments. This amendment's recommended by the United States. We also support Brazil in prioritising Purpose Code B in the next intersessional period. Thank you.
I have Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to align ourselves with the comments made by Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you. And this will be the last party, Peru.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We would also like to join and align ourselves with the comments made by the USA and Brazil, and in particular, that which Brazil said about Code Z. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I open to observer organizations, and I'll take one or two. I have AZA.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And we would remind the committee that we have had a working group on purpose codes in one form or another for about 2 decades. And these working groups have proceeded quite deliberately, and we would discourage reopening the mandate of any working group to explore definitions that have been exhaustively considered up to this point, and to focus that mandate on those purpose codes that have yet to be defined. So we would discourage reopening, for example, on purpose code Z. Thank you.
Thank you. I will pause here and consult with the Secretariat on a way forward. right, this is where I think we are concluding. Based on the discussion, the Standing Committee does not agree to paragraph recommendation A. The Standing Committee agrees to recommendation B. Standing Committee does not agree with recommendation C. And the Standing Committee would agree with recommendation D with the addition of source code P and Z, and noting that those are priorities. And then in terms of the decision, on D, I will call on the Secretariat to clarify, but that's my understanding of where you're falling out on D, but I'll have them clarify on the language for the draft decision.
Thank you, Chair. So for the draft decision set out in the annex, there was a comment on paragraph A to insert when possible before with expertise in line 2 on English version. There was a suggestion to delete the wording communication to electronic media, leaving it open to the working group how it wishes to conduct its work. Then there was an addition at the last line on paragraph B of purpose code Z, and further discussions on purpose code P. So these two would be added, and there would be a sentence giving priority to purpose code B and Z, if I understand the Standing Committee correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I look to the Standing Committee if they can, I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States would also propose sending the definition of P for personal to the COP for discussion, as it's been discussed for many intersessional periods. We also we also support B being a priority in the next intersessional period for the working group. However, we do not find that Z should be a priority code to be discussed, since it has already been discussed in past working groups.
So the Standing Committee, based on what the U.S. has just said, would agree to submit the draft definition of P to the COP for consideration. I look for other Standing Committee members for that reaction. I see nodding heads because there were suggestions made to that, asking for more clarity. So I think it'd be good that we provide that to the COP, because it's been discussed for a while, to get some consideration of it and discussion. And then I think I see the U.S. doesn't think Z is a priority, but I had other Standing Committee members accept that Z was a priority. So can we note that Z and P are priorities? Looking for others to react. And B is a priority. So we're sending P back, and I figured that's a priority, and then B and Z. And so I'm looking for agreement on that. Okay. I have Belgium.
Just to mention that we don't agree to rediscuss code Z, as it has been defined, but we would prioritize B.
I guess I would say this is a draft decision, and you'll discuss this decision at the COP. I think basically, based on the interventions I heard, there was support for looking at these. It'll be discussed at the COP, and you can decide then what the priorities are. But I see Brazil, at least that's the chair's suggestion, but I've got Brazil, Switzerland, and New Zealand, and then I'd like to end discussion.
Thank you very much. This is just to try to find a compromise. And so, we hearing the concerns and so on. I think that for us the important thing is to have Z discuss it, But for us, the main priority is B. So to try to find a compromise, we would just to include prioritization of B and try to find a compromise. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Brazil. I think that is a compromise, but I'll see what Switzerland and New Zealand would like to add.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, with Z, we are talking about the zoolo exchange between zoos. Yeah, in that case, we would also not want to see that reopened. Thank you.
New Zealand.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we see the priority as B, but in the course of discussing B, we may need to change some wording for Z. So that keep it on the table, but B is certainly the priority, but there may be some impact on the definition of Z. Thank you.
So if I understand what's been said, that Z would be among the codes that could be discussed in that decision, but we note the priority is B. It doesn't mean we, just discussed Z, you may accept what already stays, but based on what New Zealand said, your discussion of B could lead you to want to talk about Z, and if it's not in the mandate, then we've got another problem. So I suggest we put it in the list of codes. Can I get agreement on that? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 51, Electronic Systems and Information Technology, decision 19.151 by the Secretariat. I'll ask the Secretariat to introduce that one.
Thank you, Chair. The document provides an update on the normative work, the capacity building activities of the Secretariat, and discussions of the Standing Committee Working Group on Electronic Systems and Information Technology. With regards to decision 19.151C on possible alternatives to physical endorsement of permits and certificates, the Secretariat, in consultation with the working group, developed the guidelines on the use of two-dimensional barcodes on CITES permits and certificates contained in Annex 2 of this document. The guidelines provide few alternatives, including the advantages and the disadvantages. The document further provides discussion by the working group on the use of HS codes, traceability, and national data protection laws in relation to electronic permit information exchange. The Standing Committee is invited to note this document, agree on the guideline on the two-dimensional barcodes, and submit draft decisions to COP20. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call on the Animals Committee Chair as Chair of the Working Group to comment on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've prepared an intervention to say basically exactly what the Secretariat has been saying, so I don't think I need to take up much more time, and I agree on the recommendations that have been put forward. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that. So I now open the recommendations in paragraph 32 to the Standing Committee members. I have the DRC.
Merci, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the Central African sub-region, we would like to thank the Secretariat and Switzerland for having led the working group on this matter, electronic systems and information technology. We welcome the initiative behind CITES. However, we would like to draw your attention to one matter. Such systems have a need for significant operational resources. Some countries might have difficulty in actually developing and implementing a tool like that. We would like to ask our partners if it might be possible to consider providing for support so that we have positive results from these initiatives. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer parties. I have the EU.
Thank you. The EU and its member states would like to stress the importance of taking into account the e-permitting exchange based on the multiple users hub model, with which the CITES-based solution does not seem yet compatible. We would also like to reiterate our call from the previous meetings to also adopt the electronic permit information exchange guidelines to take into account the hub-based solutions. Moreover, we have, before the meeting, sent 2 small drafting, editing comments, but I will not read them here because the Secretariat has already acknowledged them. Thank you.
Thank you. I have several parties wishing to speak. I will ask you to be brief. UAE.
Thank you, Chair. The UAE appreciates the work of all involved in the preparing of this document. We acknowledge the importance of advancing electronic CITES permitting to enhance enforcement of CITES. As a country that has successfully implemented an electronic permitting system, we recognize the benefits of digitalization in reducing fraud and improving the compliance. We support continuing efforts to expand the use of electronic permitting and encourage collaborations to facilitate its effectiveness implementation in future. Thank you so much.
To the EU's point, the cross-reference for reporting will be fixed in the draft decisions 20BB, paragraph G, and 20CC, paragraph H, so that correction will be made. The Central African Republic, followed by Nigeria, and then I will conclude party interventions.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Central African Republic is taking the floor to express our support for the statement made by the representative of the Central African Group. This is indeed a worthwhile initiative. E-permitting are a good idea, and we would support the Central African region's statement on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, and then I have Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nigeria thanks the Secretariat and the CITES Standing Committee Working Group for their detailed work done on electronic system and information technologies, and therefore support the recommendations in paragraph 32A to D. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on observer organizations. Not seeing any, I will consult with the Secretariat and then conclude on this item. Okay. So I would conclude this to say that the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in paragraph 32A, B, C, and D, and the Standing Committee notes the discussion in plenary regarding mobilization of resources. Is that a way forward? I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay, thank you, and we conclude this item. I'd like to turn our attention to agenda item 56, rapid movement of wildlife diagnostic samples and musical instruments, decision 19.160, SC 78 document 56, and I will turn to Australia, who served as the working group chair, to present the document.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present our report, and I'd like to thank the members of the working group for their constructive contributions. This is a slightly strangely mandated group with two seemingly very different specimens to be discussed, but our discussions ultimately mirror each other. So what's clear is that there are already a lot of existing mechanisms for rapid movement of musical instruments and of diagnostic samples existing within the framework of our convention. But sometimes they're very confusing, and a lot of the people trying to use them struggle to understand what's available to them and where. So just very briefly to offer our recommendations, we suggest in 20AA an information gathering exercise for the Secretariat to gather information on what mechanisms exist in which countries, because the inconsistent implementation of these mechanisms seems to be part of the complexities of the system. We would propose then that information inform two new web pages, one for musical instruments and one for diagnostic samples, where that information could be presented as a sort of single window approach for practitioners. And we also propose some further simplified guidance for users of the system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I open for the Standing Committee members' discussion recommendations in paragraph 27. I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As for the musical instrument certificate, we are actually experiencing the cases in which the exporters who obtained a musical instrument certificate from us have difficulties to import their instrument into their destination countries. We welcome the web page and simplified guidance material, and would like to ask parties to provide adequate information customs and also abolish the overlapping domestic regulations to encourage the effective use of the musical instruments certificate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States, speaking on behalf of the North American region, supports the recommendations in paragraph 27 with some edits to the draft decisions recommended in subparagraph A. These edits are regarding draft decision 22AA, little paragraph A, paragraph IV. The wording could be improved as follows to change for inclusion to that are included. Additionally, in draft decision 20BB, the wording could also be approved instead of on the web page to bring together, simply provide. And that also is the same edit we have in little paragraph C. In addition, we note notification 2024-105 requested that parties to review and update their registers for scientific institutions and to communicate any changes to the Secretariat, with that due date being December 31st, 2024. Therefore, we suggest that paragraph A, little IV4 of the draft decision 20AA could be adjusted as follows to include if they did not communicate updates to the register for scientific institutions at the end of December 2024, comma, consider providing updates or more detailed information. Again, we have another edit for inclusion in that paragraph to change that to that are included. And lastly, we suggest replacing rapid with efficient when referring to non-commercial movement of musical instruments for the purposes of performance, display, or competition to better and more consistently differentiate the issues raised in the two work streams of the working group. Rapid appears in draft decision 20AA in little paragraph AI and AII and 20BB, C, and D, and also in 20CC of the draft decision. So where efficient, where rapid is, we replace, we would wish to replace it with efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer parties. Oh, apologies. I open the floor to the CITES Secretary General, who has requested to speak on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
It is just to ask, kindly ask the Standing Committee to include under 20BB, subject to the availability of extra budgetary resources. As you know, we do not have a core budget line for website modifications or maintenance, so if we would kindly ask for that insertion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for reminding us of that. It's important. I open to observer parties. I open to observer organizations, of which I have several. I will choose basically American Orchestra and WOHA.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to very briefly comment on behalf of musical instrument stakeholders. We've participated in the working group on rapid movement, and when CITES permits are required for non-commercial movement of musical instruments for travel to performances, musicians encounter significant difficulty in identifying parties that honor the musical instrument certificate and in navigating complex processes for having the documents stamped by CITES recognized authorities at each border crossing. We support the draft decisions in the annex to SC 78.56 with the changes suggested, which would gather essential information about the implementation of permit requirements and exemptions, identify relevant challenges parties, and we hope also stakeholders are included, are facing, and develop for publication on the CITES website a web page bringing together information on the available mechanisms for non-commercial movement of musical instruments. We encourage all parties to rapidly participate in this process and also do so efficiently. We stand ready to partner with you on this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on WOHA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. WOHA welcomes the efforts done by the working group. WOHA would like to remind the vital importance of rapid movement of samples related to diagnostic of disease of wildlife that may have impact on public and animal health, as well as biodiversity, stressing the importance of a One Health approach. The rapidity of shipments is key, not only because these samples are perishable, but also because the effective control of diseases, infectious or not, is often a matter of rapid response. In that context, the importance is not only linked to a number of samples that can be predicted, but also to the severity of situations that cannot always be anticipated. Hearing the difficulties to modify the current CITES mechanisms, WOHA considers that the 3 different CITES mechanisms to allow these movements could be relevant depending on the situation. But to use them adequately, education and exchanges are required. We would welcome to join development of pedagogic documents so that they are understood by all relevant stakeholders and to support more dialogue between stakeholders involved in animal health, in particular veterinary services and CITES parties. And in that sense, WOHA proposed the following amendments to point 20cc, which would read, the Secretariat shall, subject to external funding and in consultation with parties and stakeholders, develop jointly with WOHA and relevant wildlife health authorities, one-page checklist format and a simplified pedagogic guidance materials that provide comprehensive explanation of the general CITES applicable regulations for allowing rapid international movement of wildlife samples for diagnostic and or conservation purposes. And suggest to add a point 20DD that would read, the Secretariat shall ensure the dissemination of these materials to parties and stakeholders and encourage discussion between parties and sectors involved in wildlife health and conservation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. My apologies to the other organizations who wish to speak, but I'm really pressed for time. So I will consult with the Secretariat and suggest a way forward here. So I'm looking for other Standing Committee members' reaction to the U.S. proposal, their suggested amendments, and then also an observer organization, WOHA, had suggested an additional paragraph to to the draft decision, and so I'm looking to see if there's any standing committee member that supports that additional text. Taking silence that there isn't support, or there... And I would conclude that the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in A and B, but I haven't heard anyone speak in support of the suggested amendments. Then we take the decision as is, with the addition of the Secretary General's text. I have New Zealand.
Yes, we'd just like to voice support of the United States amendments that they provided, as well as the Secretary General's, of course.
Okay. Any dissension on that? All right, then basically we agree to the draft decision as amended by the United States. With the addition of the Secretary General, which is very important, funding. All right, then this one's concluded. Can I ask the U.S. to be sure that the Secretariat has your additions, since it was a little quick and I didn't get them all either? We move on to agenda item 57, specimens produced through biotechnology, decision 19.161, and I call upon the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair. This document gives an update on the work of the intersessional working group on specimens produced through biotechnology. The Standing Committee is invited to renew decisions 19161 to 19163 to COP20. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to any Standing Committee discussion in the recommendations contained in paragraph 57. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. Although it's a shame more progress wasn't made, we do support the renewal of those decisions. It's quite an important topic given how fast things are moving technology-wise. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer parties. I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We also support renewal of those draft decisions. Thank you.
I open the floor to observer parties and observer organizations. I have Peru.
Sí, brevemente. Very briefly, thank you, Madam. We support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would conclude that the Standing Committee basically agrees to the recommendations in paragraph 57. I see nodding heads. We'll conclude on this one. And move on to agenda item 58, disposal of confiscated specimens, decisions 19.17. I have the Secretary General. Apologies. Sorry, the button was for Secretariat, but it came up Secretary General. So my apologies. Disposal of confiscated specimens, decisions 19.173 and 19.17, and I ask the Secretariat to introduce it.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam. This document provides an update on decisions 19171 to 1974, including information on existing practices with respect to seized living animals and the question of the resolution on the disposal of confiscated specimens. We propose two resolutions to Resolution 17.8 with respect to the use of existing resources for the disposal of living specimens. We would recommend that the Standing Committee consider recommendations in paragraph 12, including the proposed amendments to the resolution in Annex 1 to the document. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to the Standing Committee members on the recommendations in paragraph 12. Have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. We agree with those recommendations that are proposed in this document. However, we feel that the proposed new paragraph 5 in the annex under the heading regarding the disposal of confiscated live specimens would be better included as a new subparagraph 3A in the same section because it seems to fit better with the logical order that management authorities and scientific authorities would take when faced with such a situation. So 3A, 5 would become 3A, and then 3A would become 3B, etc.
Thank you. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North America region, we support the recommendations in the document, noting decision 19.174 can be deleted if the proposed amendment to question 7 in Annex 1 of ResConf 17.8 ResConf 19 is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On recommendation A, we support the newly drafted paragraph 5. We also, in general, support the additions in question 7, however, with one amendment and a question of clarity. We would propose the or otherwise undesired under 3 to be deleted. So it would read 3. The transfer will not increase illegal or irregular trade of species, but we also want some clarification on irregular and if it's really needed because we already have illegal. On the other recommendations for the proposal to maintain the decisions and delete the decisions, we agree with the proposals in paragraph 12. Thank you.
Okay, I will give the floor to observer parties. I have Israel.
Thank you, Chair. We support all the recommendations. We just, for sake of clarity, before that, first we concur with Belgium that there is some question about what the word irregular is needed in here. But for the sake of clarity, we would suggest that in the question 7, where it says, are there no grounds, we would remove the word no, and then the answers would be reverse the order to yes and no, because you get this double negative, which gets confusing. So in other words, the question would read, are there grounds for concern? And then the questions would be the opposite, no, execute agreement, or yes, destroy and dispose. So I think just for clarity, to avoid double negative, don't have the word no in the question. Thank you, Chair.
We have Senegal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document is of very great significance because the implementation of the convention is at stake. Seizure is really a central part of our work, and stockpiles are, of course, of great importance too. And when we, for instance, in Senegal, have received ivory that has been confiscated, we do stockpile it for scientific purposes, and the stockpile builds up over the year. Now, I think that if this document goes before COP20, I think it will give rise to further discussion, but we would support that. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on observer organizations. And I have two, and I will take two interventions, but short for 1 minute. AZA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention is made on behalf of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. We appreciate the efforts of the Secretariat to compile information on existing networks and resources on the management of seized and confiscated live animals. In partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, AZA implemented a pilot program in the Southern California region to support law enforcement with the care and placement of confiscated specimens. Since launch in October 2023, we have assisted with the placement of nearly 4,000 individual live animals. Building from the successful pilot program in Southern California, we now seek to expand the network nationwide. It increases efficiency of animal placement and decreases the burden on law enforcement, which allows them more time to perform their core functions. It also ensures that each individual animal will receive the highest quality of care and quickly. Our network is included on the dedicated webpage, but we stand ready to assist the parties with any additional information or assistance as relevant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a standing committee member wishing to speak. Brazil.
Thank you very much. We're hearing the suggestion by Belgium, and even though we understand their point that this can bring some uncertainty in some countries, but other countries that may be, I'm talking about the suggestion for deletion of irregular, but in other countries these can make a difference. So we may prefer to maintain the word. If we keep that word doesn't cause any confusion, I think it would be better to maintain it. Thank you very much.
I'll call on Born Free, and then I'll conclude discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of a number of observer organisations, a list of which has been provided to the Secretariat. The limited responses to the Secretariat's notifications is disappointing. We urge the Standing Committee to support the proposed amendment to the operative text of ResCont 17.8. As regards the amendment to Annex 1, we do have concerns about the placement of confiscated live animals in commercial breeding facilities, which could result in illegally traded live specimens being used as breeding stock for commercial trade or being traded directly. In addition to the decisions suggested for retention, decisions 19.170 and 19.172 should also be retained since they represent ongoing activities. We would also urge the Standing Committee to recommend a decision or to amend decision 19.170 in order to encourage parties to develop national action plans using the guidelines in Annex 3 of ResCont 17.8 and the information provided pursuant to decision 19.169b, share them with the Secretariat so that they can be posted as appropriate on the dedicated page of the CITES website and report on their implementation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports Brazil's comments and notes that the term irregular is used throughout the annex. Thank you.
I will consult with the Secretariat, and I think we'll probably need a little more discussion. I'm looking to see if the Standing Committee members support what New Zealand has suggested, and if there's any support for what Israel suggested. And I'm not sure on the deletion of the, I'm hearing that we would like to keep the word irregular from Brazil and the US, but I would like some other discussion. I've got the UK.
Thanks, Chair. Just reflecting on the discussion we've heard, we can support New Zealand's suggestion, and we can support Belgium's deletion of or otherwise undesired. Happy to retain irregular, hearing the support from Brazil and the US. And the drafting suggestions from Israel seem sensible as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll take silence as agreement with what the UK has just said. I'm getting thumbs up, so let me take a minute to just see how I conclude. So the Standing Committee would agree to the recommendation in paragraph A. The Standing Committee would agree to maintain, would agree to paragraph B with the amendments suggested by New Zealand, North American region, and Israel. And then Standing Committee agrees to the deletions of decision in paragraph C. Is that the way forward? Okay, I'll say it again. A, submit the conference of the, Standing Committee agrees to paragraph A to submit to the conference of the party the two amendments from Annex 1 to the resolution Comp 17.8 with the amendments proposed by Belgium, and then the support to keep the word irregular, and the amendments proposed by Israel, which would get rid of a double negative, which does present problems in English. Is that agreed to? I see nodding heads, and sorry I wasn't clear the first time. Right. Moving on to agenda item 59, labeling system for the trade in caviar, decision 19.176. And I will ask Georgia, as the working group chair of that, for that discussion, to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making the introduction on behalf of the chair of the working group on labeling system for trade in caviar. The working group was established at SC 76 with the mandate outlined in the document. The working group identified shortcomings of the existing caviar labeling system which could potentially be improved by the parties. Some members of the working group suggested to use country of processing or repackaging instead of country of origin. Consensus on this issue could not be reached. Some members did not support reopening the discussion. However, a number of members highlighted the importance of such discussion in the future. The report of the study on the use of QR codes was also considered. The report is attached to the document SC 78 Doc 59. The information provided in the document was found useful for overcoming some of the shortcomings of the caviar labeling system. However, overall, given the results of the report and additional unanswered logistic questions, there was no overwhelming support to replace the current labeling system in favor of QR codes. However, some members thought that piloting the QR codes could be a reasonable next step and useful for further discussion. The Standing Committee is invited to A, note the report, B, encourage parties instead of to use the QR codes to carry out a pilot to test the use of QR codes for caviar labeling and present the information on the results to the Standing Committee at its 8th meeting to facilitate further discussions, and C, agreed that decisions 19.175 and 19.176 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you to the working group. I ask the Standing Committee to discuss the recommendations in paragraph 10 of the document. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North American region, we thank the Chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Labeling Systems for Trade in Caviar. We appreciate the report on benefits and drawbacks of QR codes as part of the universal labeling system for trade in and identification of caviar under CITES. While the report was helpful in addressing some concerns, such as code size and rates of degradation, The report failed to provide enough information for the working group to fully consider the potential risks and benefits of implementation. Due to the Secretariat's request that the contractor not include a review of information systems for storing QR code data, only minimal recommendations were voluntarily provided by the contractor, thus limiting our ability to fully consider an important component of QR codes. We note the efforts made by the working group and their discussions. The identifications of the shortcomings of the caviar labeling system provide indications on which are domestic issues, which should be addressed by the CITES authorities of those parties, versus those that fall within the purview of CITES implementation challenges. We support the document recommendations and look forward to hearing results of pilot projects on the use of QR codes for caviar labeling. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer parties. I have the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. We would like to share positive feedback on labeling. In February 2024, the Russian Federation started a pilot test in the application of a digital labeling system covering salmon and sturgeon caviars based on QR codes. In May 2024, the use of the system became a requirement. Introduction of legislation regulating this matter has enabled us to ensure transparency and strict adherence to the existing rules. We are now studying the first positive results, and we encourage other parties to adopt the same approach in line with the recommendations in the document 59 and national circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer organizations. I have IWMC and World Wildlife Fund. I'll take both, but ask you to be brief. IWMC.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We participated in the working group, and I am also speaking on behalf of an importer of caviar. We are in favor of the use of the QR code, and we're interested in hearing what has been progressing in Russia. When it comes to caviar, we have seen an enormous evolution, and there is virtually no wild caviar on the market now, and we wonder if it is not all linked to the fact that we should look at the caviar and CITES issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Call on World Wildlife Fund and then conclude discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, we would align ourselves with the comments of the United States, and we would also state that we do not support changing country of origin to country of processing. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I've heard and what I would like to conclude is that the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in paragraph 10, A, B, and C. I'm looking for nodding heads. I've got them, and so we conclude this item. I move on to agenda item 29, demand reduction to combat illegal trade, decision 19.56, and I turn to the Secretariat to introduce the doc.
Thank you, Chair. This document summarizes the work of the Secretariat in the implementation of the decision on demand reduction to combat illegal trade in CITES listed species through the organization of pilot projects and the regional training workshops to promote the use of the CITES guidance on demand reduction in African, Asian, and the Latin American regions. The Standing Committee is invited to review and submit a new set of draft decisions prepared by the Secretariat for consideration at COP20 on the collection and analysis of experiences of parties in using the guidance and the organization of new pilot projects. Thank you, Chair.
I open the floor to discussion by Standing Committee members in terms of the recommendations in paragraph 14 of the document. I have Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Brazil completely agree with the purpose of the document. I think the purpose of the document is really important. We do think that initiatives and pilot projects, however, are mainly targeted to the orange states. But it is clear for us that demand is not limited to the local context, being obvious that international demand is the main culprit in many cases. Thus, demand reduction strategies should also encompass international demand. To this end, Brazil suggests to add the following text in draft decision 20BB, paragraph B, after the text with necessary adaptation to suit local context, add, as well as considering the implications of international demand in states of origin. Thank you very much.
Brazil, can I ask you to just repeat that once more so we capture it slowly?
Sure. Sure, of course. Then we'll read, as well as considering the implication of international demand in states of origin. Did you get that? Thank you.
I open the floor to observer parties. I have Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just a small observation that it would be helpful if the guidance was placed either on the implementation or topics page of the CITES website, because it's very hard to find. So for parties to be able to use it, it should be easy to find. Thank you.
Thank you for that useful suggestion. Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the document and we also support that which Brazil said in terms of demand reduction to combat illegal trade. In accordance with notification to the parties 121 of 2024, there will be a training workshop for CITES in the Latin America region on demand reduction to combat illegal trade on species listed in CITES appendices, and it will be held in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to the 26th to 27th of March this year. The aim is to increase and build capacity for the authorities and the states in the region to help them with use of the guidance to work on combating illegal trade on CITES listed species. And we believe it's important to help reduce illegal trade, and we must put in every effort and resource possible. We'd like to thank CITES for organizing this workshop, and it will be an honor to host the region in Buenos Aires. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina, and thank you for hosting this important workshop. Peru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, we would like to align ourselves with the position set out by Brazil on an integrated strategy which also takes into account importers. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to observer organizations, of which I have several, but I'm also cognizant of the lunchtime, so I'll pick one. I call on Traffic.
Thank you, Chair. Traffic welcomes this document and has been honored to collaborate with CITES parties and the Secretariat in the implementation of demand reduction objectives under Resolution Comp 17.4 Rev Comp 19. Cornerstones since SC 77 include leading the technical components of Asia and Africa regional training and the CITES guidance on demand reduction and helping parties develop work plans for the priority behaviors, species, and audiences to target, and helping shape pilots for priority species. Traffic looks forward to collaborating with parties in the Latin America and Caribbean region next month for the regional training in line with notification 2024-121, as mentioned by Argentina, and to continuing to support implementation of the pilots of the guidance in Asia and Africa in line with Decision 1955C. Traffic would like to acknowledge support for all aspects of this work from the German government's partnership against wildlife crime implemented by GIZ on behalf of BMZ and BMUV. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. My apologies. I read my watch wrong, and we still have an hour. Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part. So I will take the two interventions, but I ask you to be brief. WCS.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be super brief. We have a lot of suggestions which I won't raise here. But we find that draft decision 20.AA only references the CITES guidance, which is good but limited. We recommend in 20.AA paragraph A, after CITES guidance, adding the text, other materials or guidance on science-based behavior change. There are other good materials out there that parties may wish to consult. Nothing against the CITES guidance, but there is other guidance. So 20.AA paragraph A, we implore the Standing Committee to add the words, other materials or guidance on science-based behavior change. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have SSN.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. SSN would like to align themselves with the comments from Brazil, and we'd like to congratulate Argentina and align ourselves with what countries in the region have said. We think it is essential to draw attention in a very important manner that just reducing demand can bring about the end of illegal trafficking. There are not sufficient armies or budgets to combat illegal trade whilst demand is not reduced. And the reduction of demand happens in the consumer countries. So it's extremely important that we continue working on this. This is a crucial point for CITES and achieving the conservation of species. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the work done on this for various reasons mentioned by others. Just to say, we support the addition by Brazil and can support WCS's suggestion as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can also support the suggestion made by WCS. Thank you.
I will take a few minutes to consult with the Secretariat based on the discussion. Thank you. All right, in consultation with the Secretariat, I've done a little wordsmithing of Brazil's text to have it in line with how we have used other terms. So basically, decision 20AA, little paragraph A would read, share their experience, oh, that's WCS, sorry. It's 20BB, little paragraph B that Brazil has suggested, and at the end of it we would say to suit local context as well as consideration of the implications of international demand in range states, which is consistent with our terminology. And then I heard support from the US for adding the addition to 20AA, little paragraph A, which would now read, share their experience in using the guidance for CITES parties to develop and implement demand reduction strategies to combat illegal trade in CITES listed species and other materials on science-based other materials on science-based behavioral change. with other parties and the Secretariat. So with those edits, I look to the Standing Committee to agree to the recommendations in paragraph A, B, and C. I'm seeing nodding heads, and we move forward with having more time. Oh, I have Brazil.
Sorry, could you repeat again your suggestion? We were just discussing here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you had basically had considering as a verb. I've changed it to a noun, and you said international demand in states of origin, and states of origin are the range states. So, I hope. So it would read subject to extra budgetary resources and in consultation with donors and potential target parties, organize pilot projects to promote the use of the guidance for priority species and parties with necessary adaptation to suit local context, as well as consideration of the implications of international demand in range states.
It's okay. Thank you very much.
So with that, we can then, I look to the Standing Committee that we can accept those changes from the US and Brazil and accept the paragraphs. Thank you. Now we move on to another important document that I'm glad we have time for. Document 10, Emerging Operational Matters of the Committee's Decisions 19.3, and I turn to the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you, Madam Chair. This document on the emerging operational matters of the committees aims to look at various options for the organization of committee meetings in the case of exceptional circumstances. The document proposes guidance on the organization of meetings in exceptional circumstances which take into account the recommendations of the Animals and Plants Committee. It also raises other emerging operational issues such as the increasing and enlargement of an online option for decision-making in intersessional work and the possibility for participation by parties directly concerned by an agenda item. It also contains the comments submitted by parties following SC 77, which have been taken into account in the recommendations on paragraph 25. Thank you.
Thank you. So I invite, I'm going to make a point of clarification on discussion for this, since this is an operational matter and really affects the operation of the committees by parties. I would like discussion on this matter limited to standing committee members and parties. So I open the floor to standing committee members. I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania supports the recommendations with 2 amendments. The modalities for hybrid meetings at recommendation 24B are very important to the Oceania region, and we ask that they are inserted into the guidance document referred to in recommendation 24C on the application of the rules of procedure of the Standing Committee in an online or hybrid meeting, also attached at Annex 2. This is to ensure that the recommendation 24B and these important modalities are captured in some guidance and are not lost over time as we move forward. The second amendment we're suggesting is in the proposed new section of Resolution 18.2 at subpara 9A. And here we suggest replacing the 2 months to find an alternative location, an alternative host location, is replaced with 3 months, which in our view would be far more realistic. It would be very difficult for some parties to get agreement from a government within 2 months to host a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the analysis and for proposing a way forward on the organization of online and hybrid meetings in exceptional circumstances. We agree with the way forward proposed in the document. The only clarification we would like to make it concerns the amendments in Resolution 18.2 on the establishment of committees, specifically new paragraph 9b. In particular, we would like to emphasize that in our understanding, this paragraph applies in situations where neither committee members nor their alternates can travel to the meeting location and should not become a standard practice. Thank you, Chair.
I call on Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We think the online meetings will be helpful for cost cutting. However, we need to consider time zone difference and especially countries with poor internet connection. As in recommendation B, if we hold online these standing committee meetings 3 hours every day to 2 to 3 weeks, we do not think that is quite realistic. So for the sake of the health of participants, we are not able to support recommendation B. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can support the recommendations. However, with regard to the proposed amendments in Annex 3 of Resolution 18.2, paragraphs 9A and B, following on from George's comments, we would suggest the proposal is amended to clarify whether, under specific exceptional circumstances, the option to connect to a committee meeting online would be open to all parties regardless of their circumstances, or whether the option would be open only to those parties directly affected by the exceptional circumstances in question. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The North American region thanks the Secretariat for preparing the document. The North American region supports recommendation A, B, and C in paragraph 24 with one minor edit to paragraph B, subparagraph I, to allow for discretion when deciding the length of the meeting. So we propose changing will to may, such as the paragraph reads, the length of the meeting may be 2 or 3 times longer. Regarding recommendation D, the North American region generally supports submitting proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 18.2 to COP20. As CITES is a technical convention and diplomatic representatives may not always be able to provide robust representation necessary to actively engage in CITES discussion and decision-making, we believe it is the party's decision to determine its representation at meetings of the Standing Committee, even in exceptional circumstances. Therefore, we propose an edit to paragraph 9, subparagraph B, under regarding exceptional circumstances to delete the phrase and do not have a diplomatic representation available at the location of the meeting. Regarding recommendation E, the North American region supports the recommendation that decision 19.1 and to 19.3 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Lastly, regarding recommendation F concerning a new intersessional decision-making procedure for the organization of intersessional work, we seek additional information regarding that recommendation. In the document, the Secretariat notes that the new intersessional decision-making process it recommends could relate, for example, to the establishment of intersessional working groups immediately following a meeting of the Conference of the Parties. We note that such procedure is already in place for all 3 committees and therefore seek clarification of whether it's simply to, the simple aim is to formalize an existing informal procedure in respective to the rules of procedure, or are there other scenarios under which it would envision using this new process? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on Brazil.
Thank you very much. Start with discussion on paragraph 9 and 10. Brazil highlights that would like to draw the attention that many of the discussion here was related to the issue of exceptional circumstances. So the mandate that we had in the beginning was to deal with that. And I think there's a bit of generalization when it comes to recommendation B. We can either delete it or we can amend it just to include under exceptional circumstances, such as those experienced during the COVID pandemic, so that it's clear that the online committee meetings are only organized during exceptional circumstances, which of course we may need to do it, but this was the main aim of the exercise. Regarding paragraph 9 and 10, the general discussion, Brazil highlights that the adoption of regular virtual meetings would not solve the identified problem. On the contrary, it would exacerbate the organization workload. Brazil believes that the solution lies in the rationalization and prioritization of CITES work, avoiding in the inclusion of topic that exceeds its mandate, which has been happening frequently. Furthermore, Brazil also reminds of the inherent limitation of virtual negotiations and emphasizes that the potential increase in the number of meetings of the Standing Committee would bring significant challenges for developing countries, which do not have teams fully dedicated to CITES issues. On the other hand, Brazil may agree on the possibility of online participation, provided it is requested by a country during a in-person meeting. We also think it's important to reflect on current rules for electronic work of CITES working groups, taking into account the operational difficulties dealt by developing countries. So with that, I finished my intervention. Thank you very much.
I call on Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We align our position with Japan. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor to observer parties. I have the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. We would like to register that, in principle, we do not support organization of meetings in an online or hybrid format in exceptional circumstances as set out in paragraph 3A and B of the document. Face-to-face meetings allow for a productive exchange of views and experiences vital for the effective implementation of the Convention. In addition, meetings in a hybrid format last 2 to 3 times longer, which could also have an impact on increasing costs. We are also against elaborating the new rule that would set out a shorter process of decision-making in an intersessional period in line with paragraph 12. It is unclear how the process of delivering and exchange of messages could be traced and how it could legally apply, and what happens if messages are not received or missed. So we do not support recommendations B, C, and F. Thank you, Madam.
All right, I will now pause and consult with the Secretariat and see where we end up here. The chair has consulted with the Secretariat and calls on them to go with the way forward that I feel is the best one based on all I've heard, but it is complicated, so I will call on them to read out all the changes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So based on the interventions, we're hoping to take as much of the comments on board as possible. So if you turn your attention to the recommendations in paragraph 24A, I think everybody supported 24A, so that will be accepted as is. On 24B, I think Brazil wanted to make a comment that it should be clarified that it should be under exceptional circumstances, such as those during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're proposing to insert that text to clarify, because that was the intent at the beginning of B. And we would take on also the edit by the United States that says the length of a meeting may be 2 to 3 times longer than an in-person meeting. And we're hoping that that would also address Japan's concern that it was maybe a little bit too ambitious, even though the Secretariat would like to note that this description here is basically what we did for the Animals and Plants Committee. When we did have it online as a session. So hopefully that would address Japan's concern and just put it as really non-binding as possible. And we'll see how it works really concretely. To respond to the comment of New Zealand, we're proposing that that text also be included in the guidance that's mentioned in paragraph C. So we will put it as a recommendation from the Standing Committee, but we will repeat it, the same text in the guidance, if that's acceptable as a way forward. No comments on C, I think, unless I'm mistaken, so we would agree that one. Now to the amendments to the resolution. So there was only really the 2 paragraphs in question, 9A and B. So I think, I forgot there was New Zealand that wanted to switch from 2 to 3 months. I think we're proposing that as a way forward for the committee. So basically, if no alternative location is found within 3 months of its original date, the meeting is to be organized fully online. The US in paragraph 9B suggested that we delete "and who do not have a diplomatic representation available at the location of the meeting," saying that it's up to the delegation, to the parties to decide on who they want to send to CITES meetings. So we're proposing that as a deletion. To answer the comment of the UK, the question is, yes, it would be only affected members. That was the answer to your question. Going back to the recommendations, sorry. Back to 24. So 24E, we agree that the decisions have been implemented. And the question about the intersessional decision-making procedure, it would be, as the US pointed out, we do tend to establish intersessional working group as a matter of practice, except it's not written anywhere. So the intent is really to put in writing what we've been doing. And again, that should be sent to the Standing Committee and also to the Animals and Plants Committee, because it's everybody's rules of procedure. They need to look at their rules of procedure, each committee. So the question is, do you want to have the Secretariat propose that in writing and then Animals, Plants, and Standing Committee decide? Or we shouldn't bother and just not do it, which is completely up to you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so having heard all that now, I look to the Standing Committee members if we can adopt this with the changes that we just heard. Agree to it, not adopt, sorry. I'll get it by the end of the day. I see nodding heads, and I really appreciate this one was a bit complicated but important to get through. I now turn to document 52 on risk assessment and analysis for border control of CITES listed species, decision 19.155. And I turn to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document provides an update on the development of this study and accompanying guidance on risk assessment and inspection for CITES trade controls. The guidance, developed in collaboration with the World Customs Organization, has been drafted but is not yet finalized. The process took longer than expected due to delays in developing an appropriate methodology and receiving responses to the survey. To advance the finalization of the study and the guidance, the Secretariat plans to hold an online consultation meeting tentatively scheduled for 17 March 2025. The final guidance will be presented for endorsement at the 81st meeting of the Standing Committee. The Standing Committee is invited to take note of the present document, encourage parties to participate in the proposed online consultation, and propose renewal of decisions 19.153 to 19.155 to COP20. Thank you.
Cognizant of the time and that we have 18 COM documents, the chair would like to propose to the Standing Committee that this is one we just take note of. So I would propose to the Standing Committee members here that we limit discussion to both Standing Committee and observer parties and organizations, and suggest that we could conclude this document with basically the Standing Committee agreeing to the recommendations in paragraph 5 of taking note. But if people have any changes to propose, I'm open to that. So I look to Standing Committee members if they can agree with closing this one and taking note and agreeing with the recommendations. Okay, I see agreement, and we'll move on to the next one. So we move on to agenda item 18, the World Wildlife Trade Report, decision 19.131, and I invite the Secretariat to introduce that document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document summarizes the feedback from parties and the joint meetings of the Plants and Animals Committees on the potential utility and drawback of producing on a regular basis a World Wildlife Trade Report. Although responses received are diverse and divergent, there is a general recognition of the merit of such a report, and the difference lies in the scope of the report and the frequency of the production. Based on such a feedback, the Secretariat proposes to alternate between the production of an overview report on trade in CITES species and the comprehensive World Wildlife Trade Report. The Standing Committee is invited to review the comments received and a set of draft decisions for consideration at COP20 on the preparation of the overview report and the comprehensive World Wildlife Trade Report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This document does warrant discussion, so I will open the floor to the Standing Committee members first. I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the document, and we welcome the proposal of the two-pronged approach with the two different types of reports for the next two intersessional periods, as summarized in paragraph 6. There are merits in the, as summarized in paragraph 6, there are merits in the preparation of a World Wildlife Trade Report, particularly as a useful tool to communicate to wider public how international wildlife trade works. However, we are concerned that the preparation of such reports could come at the expense of and lead to reduced resources, both financial and human, for addressing more urgent needs central to the implementation of the Convention, such as review processes, compliance issues, implementation and capacity building, and others. We acknowledge the Secretariat's efforts to actively seek external funding for the preparation of the reports. However, we are not sure whether this active fundraising effort should be viewed as a reflection of the Secretariat's priorities. Regarding the proposed content, we oppose any inclusion of price data. For several member states of the European Union, it is already legally impossible to collect this data as it is beyond their assigned competencies. For parties that theoretically could collect such data, it might require substantial adaptation of their permit issuing system, and it would further increase the already high reporting burden for CITES authorities. Additionally, we note that providing the highest estimated unit price might have some negative consequences on the species, highlighting their value. Regarding recommendation C, we note that the information requested in decision 20AA has already been provided by several parties, including the EU and its member states, in response to notification number 2023-109. We suggest that if the Secretariat requests further views to gain a better understanding, decision 20AA should be edited to specifically invite feedback from other parties that have not yet submitted the requested information. So the decision 20AA would read, on voluntary basis, parties which did not yet provide feedback and views are invited to, and etc. With regard to decision 20CCA, we request to add based on the feedback and views of the parties. So the decision would read, subject to extra budgetary resources, the Secretariat shall prepare an outline of the overview report, and based on the parties' feedback and views, an initial outline, etc. We otherwise agree with the draft decisions in the annex to the document for submission to the Conference of the Parties. We also agree with recommendation D. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States, speaking on behalf of the North American region, and in light of limited resources, does not support the Secretariat's proposed way forward as stated in paragraphs 11 through 15 of the document. We are not convinced that the World Wildlife Trade Report, as envisioned, will significantly support the effective implementation of CITES. We are concerned of the burden of preparation of the reports would impose on the parties as well as the Secretariat, and that the additional workload would extend beyond the scope of CITES, such as examining the socioeconomic impacts of trade. We note there are significant differences in opinion regarding its scope and frequency, as illustrated by the responses to notification 2023-109. These differences were not resolved by the document proposing a two-pronged approach for producing future reports. We also note the CITES Wildlife Trade View can provide much of the same trade overview information without additional work being identified. As such, we would suggest limiting the work to delete decision 20AA and only retain 20BB and 20CC paragraph A, amended to delete the reference to the initial outline of the Comprehensive World Wildlife Trade Report and the deletion of COP 22 and retain 20CC paragraph B.
Thank you. I turn to the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We too would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the document. The UK can support recommendations A and D. We recognise the potential value of an overview report that could provide a global summary of legal trade in CITES species and could be useful as a communication tool linked to the CITES strategic vision and its delivery. We can support the proposed approach outlined in recommendation B. However, we share others' reservations over the production of a more comprehensive report as outlined in paragraph 11B, noting the value of such a report inevitably depends on the underpinning data, and much of the data and information required to prepare a comprehensive report is either not consistently available, validated, or routinely collected by many parties. In this context, we have serious concerns about the proposal to collect price data, whether on a voluntary basis or not. Parties have already highlighted these concerns relating to the feasibility and challenges of collating price data and attributing values to CITES listed species and the use and interpretation of any information collected. The UK therefore continues to have significant reservations on the merit and worth of the comprehensive report for use by parties. Despite our reservations, we can support the draft decisions in the annex of document 18, noting that the Secretariat is only being directed to produce an outline of a potential comprehensive report subject to extra budgetary resources, and welcome the opportunity for Standing Committee to scrutinise the outline of any reports before resources are committed as set out in draft decision 20BB. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We share the concerns of the UK for the inclusion of the price data. So price information may have the sensitivity, and because of the affected by the type of product and transaction, so the analysis may become quite rough. And even with the voluntary basis, we don't want to consume the scarce resource of Secretariat for such a rough trial. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia welcomes and supports the Worldwide Trade Review pilot project and appreciates the efforts of the CITES Secretariat in its implementation. We reaffirm our commitment to complying with the preparation of the non-determined finding and ensuring that the trade of TSL strictly adheres to the principles of legality, sustainability, and a precautionary approach. Furthermore, Indonesia welcomes and supports the report and the suggestion of periodic publication of such reports, which provide a comprehensive overview of wildlife trade from various perspectives. This includes the routes, scales, and patterns of international trade in CITES-listed species, the monetary values, conservation impacts, and socioeconomic benefits of such trade, as well as the interrelationship between legal and illegal trade. The Worldwide Trade Report will serve as a valuable tool for CITES parties in achieving a balance between conservation and sustainable use. Indonesia remains committed to ensuring that wildlife trade is managed responsibly, contributing to both conservation efforts and sustainable economic benefits. We support the draft decision and to present the document to the COP. Thank you.
I call on New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania echoes the concerns raised by some other parties, particularly with relation to the resourcing of this proposal. The fact that many parties are not able to collect the data that is required to inform the report. And we're also very concerned about adding additional reporting burdens to small parties who are struggling already with the reporting burdens they have. On the basis of this, we really question the merits of the report, and we would support the United States suggestions. Thank you.
Call on Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We also share the concern about the resources for this report, and we would like to support the approach by the United Kingdom in this matter. Thank you.
I open the floor to observer parties. I have Peru.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like previous speakers, we think that it is good to have clear information made available so that authorities understand the impact of wildlife trade. However, given the differences of views expressed by parties on the different possible forms this report could take, we need to make sure that we do our utmost to make sure that the resources available to the convention are put to the best possible and most effective use. So we do understand why people do have their hesitations, and we do recognize that there's going to be a difference of species and where they are on what value chain. Thank you.
I call on the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. We thank the Secretariat for preparing this document. However, we believe that the information in the World Wildlife Trade Report could be duplicative of the information provided by parties in their annual national reports. So we believe that the report only makes sense if it can provide added value. In addition, we are concerned about the funding for its preparation and the human resources. And we also support the comments with regard to the price, that it should not be part of the report, the comments that were just made. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Senegal.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would tend to agree with most of those who have taken the floor, Oceania and others. We don't think that the report under discussion would be particularly useful, and it would mean additional costs. Some parties have difficulty in providing a report on appendix listed species. if we are to talk about an world wildlife trade report, we might well be going beyond the mandate of this convention. We might find ourselves discussing species that are not CITES Appendix listed. In other words, we don't think that this report is necessary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and then I have Molly.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Indeed, I align myself with some of the countries we've heard, Russia and Senegal. In terms of this report on national level, we have many concerns, and there are countries that are delayed already with the production of national reports. If we have to add to a World Wildlife Trade report, this will create more difficulties, in particular if we think about the issues linked to covering them. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to observer organizations. And I will take two. I have traffic.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of Traffic and IUCN. We welcome the Secretariat's proposal to revise the timing and structure of the World Wildlife Trade Report in line with the recommendations outlined in the draft decisions. We strongly support the move towards the preparation of a comprehensive report to help assess the fulfillment of the CITES strategic vision and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework by 2030, as well as the development of a more concise overview report to be produced on a regular basis, starting with COP21. As partners involved in the pilot World Wildlife Trade Report, Traffic and IUCN stand ready to contribute our expertise and experience gained, and offer our support in the preparation of both the comprehensive and overview report if deemed appropriate. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I have China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We commend the Secretariat's work on the future production of a World Wildlife Trade Report. We support Secretariat's proposal of a two-pronged approach for the next two international periods, and agree the decision 1930 and 1931 have been implemented and can be deleted. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
And then finally, I have the Alliance for Animals in Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of a number of organizations. We'll provide the list. We agree with the concerns raised by many of the parties and standing committee members here that this report is not necessary and that this is not a time to overburden this convention with further financial commitments and resources necessary. We believe that this report would not advance the objectives of the convention and could introduce bias. It would put some countries into a very difficult positions with reporting on things like price, which highly fluctuate. We would urge that the decisions here, the draft decisions, be rejected and that this item not be carried forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will pause here and come back to you. Okay, on this one, we've had much discussion. I would like to ask the Standing Committee if we can agree to recommendation 15A. I heard support for that, so I would suggest we have agreed to that. In recommendation B, I think we note all the discussion and views expressed during this plenary discussion of document SC 78, document 18. And then I basically, Standing Committee agrees to recommendation C, that decisions 19.30 and 19.31 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Most of our discussion centered around the draft decisions and the annex to this document, and I heard divergent views, and there was some support for the whole comprehensive. Some wanted to just see an outline, and some members and parties wanted to delete the draft decisions. So I'm trying to come up with a compromise, and so I will call on the Secretariat where I think to suggest some alternative language for some of the decisions and see if that's a way forward. So I'll call on the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. For draft decision 20AA, there was a suggestion to include in the heading reference to parties that have not yet provided feedback and views. So insert on a voluntary basis, parties which have not yet provided feedback and views are invited to. Then there was very limited support, if any, for including price data. So we could remove the reference to price data of including price data. So it would just read socioeconomic impacts of trade in CITES listed species of CITES specimens in trade in annual reports. And then we would move to 20BB, and the proposal would be to delete the references to the initial outline of a comprehensive worldwide trade report. So it would just be the Standing Committee shall review and provide feedback on the outline of an overview report submitted by the Secretariat under Decision 20CC paragraph A. And then in draft decision 20CC, the Secretariat, subject to extra budgetary resources, the Secretariat shall prepare an outline of the overview report, taking into consideration parties' feedbacks and views. And this would be considered by the Standing Committee. So we would delete the reference to and an initial outline of the Comprehensive World Wildlife Trade Report. And we would delete the word and COP22 respectively. And then this would then allow in paragraph B, that would allow the overview report to go ahead, and it would allow in paragraph C, and taking into consideration the decisions in 20BB, there would be a consideration if there would be a more comprehensive report. We wouldn't make the COP would make no decisions on this at the next COP. It would be postponed, whether there would be a comprehensive report. There would be no reference to this in these draft decisions. I hope that was clear.
Is that clear to the Standing Committee members? And I look to reaction to what I've suggested. I think probably the beginning, it's the draft decisions that I'm looking for reactions to what the Secretariat has read out. And I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification. The North American region suggested that socioeconomic impacts of trade also be removed from the request from parties, including price data. And then for draft decision 20CC, little b, is that remaining? Or if A is to create an outline and send it to the Standing Committee. Shouldn't B be postponed to see what the Standing Committee thinks about the outline?
All right, let me take this in parts. So basically, we did hear several interventions that talked on eliminating the price data. The U.S. is now suggesting that that was meant to, they wanted to eliminate that whole phrase on socioeconomic data. And so I'm looking for some support or non-support of that suggestion. Before I move on to 20CC, maybe we can wrap up 20AA. I wasn't clear on the interventions made, whether we are deleting all of the socioeconomic data or just the price data. Looking for some standing committee reviews to what the U.S. has suggested, or the North American region, in fact, has suggested. And I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan supports U.S. position.
I have Indonesia.
Support the socioeconomic still maintaining in the text.
I'll give you a moment to think about that, standing committee members, and move to 20CC. So essentially, A was, as it was read out by the Secretariat, but now there's discussion of whether we still need B and C, or we basically have just an outline done and then it would be discussed by the Standing Committee. And so I'm looking at the Secretariat here.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that the chronological order in these decisions is a little, maybe a little unclear. The idea would be that the Secretariat would prepare an outline for consideration by the Standing Committee, and then in 20CC, little paragraph B, we could add in the beginning, taking into account the advice by the Standing Committee, prepare an overview report. That was the intention. Thank you.
Thank you, that's clearer. So can we then accept 20CC with the changes as proposed? I'm seeing some nods, maybe not enough yet. People are still discussing. I'll give you another minute, because I really have only heard from 3 standing committee members, 2 in favor of eliminating the socioeconomic data, and 1 standing committee member, Indonesia, wanting to keep it. I would be more comfortable if I heard from some more standing committee members. I have Kenya.
Chair, we agree that the data on socioeconomic needs to be eliminated from the report. It is cumbersome to develop it and even to manage the data. Thank you, Chair.
Still have some 2 minutes.
Again, this is a draft decision that's going to the COP, so right now what I'm hearing is there's support from members to eliminate this phrase, and it will be discussed at COP20, and perhaps then, if it's needed, it could be added back in. Can we move forward with that? I see nodding heads on that, and so 20AA little a would read, explore the feasibility of collecting and compiling information at the national level on the conservation of CITES listed, of trade in CITES listed species, of CITES specimens on trade and annual reports. Okay, so I'm hearing from the Secretariat, which was why I sort of stumbled over reading this, because essentially if we take out the socioeconomic impacts and the price data, really what we're having a report on is the trade that of the data that's presented in the annual reports. And so there really isn't any need for this feasibility of compiling the information because it's already contained in the annual reports. So there is a difference here in full. So yeah, there would be nothing to have. So originally the North American region, if I thought, yeah, if we take that out, do we really need 20 AA now becomes the decision. So now I look to standing committee members on whether we keep 20 AA as written, but it's really meaningless, or we just delete it.
20 AA, small a, but keep.
Right. No. So 20 AA, and I have Indonesia and then Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to maybe emphasize more why we need to maintain the socioeconomic informations. It's related to job creation and impact of livelihood, which is important for why the conservation is also have to be maintained in the sustainable development achievement. So it's like a kind of balance. Why we're doing trade, and then at the same time we also achieve the sustainable development. And this is also in line with the content of Chapter 5 regarding the socioeconomic impact of trade in CITES listed species. So I think that's maybe a merit for members to consider it to maintain the proposal of the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Kenya.
Chair, we would have wished in the first place to have the 3 decisions deleted. However, we have considered that if the committee decides that this draft decision should go forward, we could be amenable to other amendments. And therefore, that's the reason we are requesting that we don't include issues of the economic impacts. It will be imbalanced, and here is a case where parties are asked to explore and to report, but we consider that the reporting done through the annual trade report would be adequate even to do an analysis, and we can see how the trade is being managed. So we consider this a report. If it has to be done, then we only leave it to be an overview of a report, but not overburdening in getting this data, the economic impact, because that will have to show. We are in agreement that from the room that issues of presenting the prices, getting the prices of the specimens will be a challenge. And if that is a challenge, then it is even a challenge to develop a report that is reflecting on the economic impact. So we consider annual trade reporting should be adequate to allow for analysis of the volumes and the trade, and that can give an indication on what is the impact of that trade to the species that are being traded. So, Madam Chair, we consider that if we have to amend these decisions, then we should not include the elements of the economic impact. Then, because I had thought I had been switched off, I wanted also to speak to draft decision 20CC, But if we are going step by step, I can raise it later, not now. But we could, as I've said, initially we considered that the 3 draft decisions necessitate to be deleted. But now we are doing the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I heard some support from some of the standing committee members in particular for 20BB in terms of having an outline and getting the standing committee to look at that. So I don't think we can delete all the decisions. It now becomes, do we need 20AA, given that I seem to have more standing committee members suggesting we take out the economic data. So then really, you don't need 28A because you're going to look at the annual report. But that can still, you can still do 20BB and have this outline presented and discussed. And then I'll get to 20CC if we in fact move forward. So I guess I'm struggling here trying to find, if we had more time, this is one that would probably go to a drafting or working group, but we don't have that time. So as a compromise, I throw out, let's forget 20AA and let's discuss 20BB, and then if we could get to some conclusion on 20CC. But basically, I think on 20BB, we have, I'll ask the Secretary to read again what 20BB reads, but I think I have agreement from the Standing Committee on 20BB. Okay, so do we have agreement on 20BB as amended that basically little a just becomes review and provide feedback on the outline of an overview report submitted by the Secretariat under Decision 20CC paragraph A, and the study prepared by the we're not, that's what we still have to all decide on yet. So basically 20BB is we agreed on an outline. Is that acceptable? I see nodding heads. Okay. Thank you. 20CC, and I guess I'll ask the Secretariat to go over where we are in 20CC based on the discussion we've had.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding was that with the suggested and additional amendments, the text would read as follows. Subject to extra budgetary resources, the Secretariat shall prepare an outline of the overview report based on the parties' feedback and views that we have already in this document, just for clarification. So based on the parties' feedback and views, prepare an outline of the overview report with explanations and etc. For consideration by the Standing Committee, and B, taking into account the advice by the Standing Committee, prepare an overview report with the trends and patterns of global trade, etc. No changes to B, and I don't think we would need paragraph C here because we have just agreed to delete, you have just agreed to delete paragraph A. So C would be deleted as well.
So that's the way forward with 20CC. We would have A and B as just read out by the Secretariat. And so I look to the Standing Committee if we can agree to that. I'm seeing nodding heads, and recall this is what the Standing Committee is sending to COP20. I assume you'll have discussion at COP20 on this further. Thank you for your spirit of cooperation. And with that, I think we've reached the lunch hour, and it's probably good to have a break because we will go through 18 COM documents this afternoon, but hopefully the working groups have given us COM documents that have been discussed thoroughly and agreement may go quickly. So I'll turn to the Secretariat for housekeeping announcements.
I have no housekeeping announcements, just to wish you a good lunch and see you at 2 o'clock sharp. And we will start with ComDoc 1. Thank you.